This class is about the Marshall Plan and the absolute necessity to know about the Marshall Plan and understand it, to understand international development, how it came into being, what happened, and its potentials for what could happen in the future. The class focuses on a particular film called The Marshall Plan, Against the Odds, produced by PBS, and I cannot begin to reproduce that video, and one has to look at it, not only because of the extent of what it says, because it's evidence. We discuss qualitative and quantitative evidence very much. Well, what you see in the film is not only pictures, but you see what goes on. You see people like the economist Lincoln Gordon actually crying when he talks about a certain presentation by a German representative. And that's a true measure of the emotional power and understood importance of that event, as well as any figure that you count. Though we now know, because behind tears may be mirror neurons, we probably could count the mirror neurons firing. Now, why is the Marshall Plan so important? Well, I look at the Marshall Plan as the big bang of international development. Certainly things existed before, and we'll look at those, but things probably may exist before the Big Bang as well, because the Big Bang is credited with creating our universe, not all eternity. The Marshall Plan was the moment where a whole series of other types of practices suddenly, in a dynamic of tremendous need, crisis, response, created a new transformative way of behaving on the part of nations and on the behavior that went into relations between nations in terms of mutual assistance, collaboration, and help. And that's why it's incredibly important to understand it. As the film itself points out, the Marshall Plan was probably the greatest example of public generosity in history. So it's a historic event. It's absolutely unique. But it was transformative in producing a new set of behaviors and relations between nations in terms of social, political, and economic change. It's also important from us because, as we discussed, it was born from the results of war, but it went beyond merely the reconstruction of what happened before the war. And it purposely put in a series of policies in response to the war that it hoped and to a significant extent succeeded in creating a different world than had happened after World War I, where what was really planted was the seeds of World War II. Now, the problem with the Marshall Plan is, to the extent it's remembered, it's often misunderstood. People think it was a gigantic program. It was run by the State Department, which it wasn't. It was conceived largely by them, but it was not run by them. And they think it largely was a case of giving a lot of money to Europe, and the Europeans had a lot of skills, and because they had the skills, they could take the money and goods, and they could reconstruct Europe. What we're going to see, it was a lot more than that. It was really about a major transformation in behavior in terms of cooperation and mutual aid between countries. And we'll see that that was at the very core, because it began with the United States requiring the Europeans to work together and refusing to even consider their demands unless they established a permanent joint body of collaboration. So the theme of collaboration and mutual aid is integral to this understanding of the Marshall Plan, and integral to understanding, as we will see, how development succeeds or fails. What we'll also see is how it came about in terms of its acceptance and its design by both Americans and Europeans. And what we'll see there is the amazing degree to which something so positive can have people actually respond to it negatively. In the United States, you had a very conservative wing that, as is usually the case, was saying we need budget balancing and we need to cut the deficit and we need to reduce taxes, and the Americans couldn't afford it. And in Europe, you had the phenomena of communist power backed by the USSR that quite rightly saw the Marshall Plan as a threat to their aims of at best, overtaking larger parts of Europe, and at worst, at least weakening any sort of Atlantic alliance. So that's a very important thing, that dynamic, and how it was overcome. How it was overcome in Europe through very good communication, one might call propaganda, about the Marshall Plan and how it was overcome in America through the use of the personal witnessing of people of integrity, particularly General Marshall, who went around and explained to the American public why it was necessary and got them to back it. And some other interesting people, such as the film actor James Stewart, who sort of symbolized all that was good and right and caring in small town America, and also, for instance, helped sell the plan. So we'll see that interesting dynamic of American politics. What we will see, and that brings us back to sort of a Jimmy Stewart type scenario, that the plan, Marshall Plan, certainly was put in place because of political exigencies in holding the communists back. Certainly, it had some support because it, in fact, was economically beneficial to America in that most of the money was actually spent in America for American goods that went to Europe. But there is no question, as you will see, that it would not have succeeded if it hadn't been sold also on the basis of the values and empathy of the American people, and it wouldn't have succeeded if the people who implemented didn't feel that way. And we're going to see the role of key individuals. Marshall sold it, but we'll see how bipartisan leadership, Paul Hoffman, a Republican businessman, Averell Harriman, a famous Democratic rich leader, worked together leading it. Jean Monnet in France. We'll see some what might be called secondary individuals such as James Silberman, who conceived the technical assistance program. All these people were driven, they were highly value-driven people, highly moral people, highly ethical people, and they were doing what they did because of a feeling that it was right and necessary, and they were privileged to play this role. Not a self-interest driven agenda. And lastly, we'll see its enduring legacies, particularly the European community, NATO, how the model of mutual aid and cooperation translated directly into NATO. So we got development actually leading to military security, not vice versa. That's a very interesting example. And also in terms of international development today, we'll see how many of the things that were done during the Marshall Program, from loans to guarantees to technical assistance, continue on today, even the idea of the importance of collaboration. But we'll have to sit back and reflect, and we'll see how with the coming of the Korean War and the Cold War, that last lesson, which probably is the most important, and was not just a lesson of best practice, but of necessity, namely the need for mutual collaboration and cooperation and sacrifice for a larger good, unfortunately suffered severe damage, and to this day has never recovered. People still say it's important, but they don't understand that it's absolutely a necessity, that it is at the heart of international development as a phenomenon and will be at the heart of any transformation of it in the 21st century into a highly effective new way of bringing progress and prosperity and peace to our global world.